riches are in niches. And instead of trying to be something for like one thing for everybody, if you niche it down to where, from a business standpoint, you might look at it like, well, there's not a lot of market share in that. But the market share that is in that is what you would, if you can tap that vein, you really will make profit. You will be successful.
Right. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from, and welcome to another episode of Glitch, Grind, Glow. If this is your first time joining me, my name is Candace Scarborough Sanchez, and I am a proud Black businesswoman, entrepreneur, tech consultant, and I'm here basically using this platform to try and expand my reach across the tech industry and kind of close out the gaps for minorities in tech and their understanding of all things business entrepreneurship, business ownership, and really where my niche is in tech startups. So this is your first time joining us. Please make sure that you like the video, subscribe, follow us on all our socials, Glitch, Grind, Glow on Instagram, Glitch, Grind, Glow podcast on Facebook. But today, without further ado, I'm excited to say that we have a special guest. It's actually, I would say, a friend, but also someone that has given me a lot of information and mentorship over the years in real estate. He's actually my realtor. But, but I have here with us today Curtis Price, who is really what we call a wellness specialist. So Curtis has a long history of being a business owner. He's opened fitness studios, and he's also on a journey to expand his wellness specialist expertise. So I don't think I can do as good of a job kind of selling who you are and telling the world who you are. So what I like to do in every episode that I have with guests is to kind of open up the floor for you to do your 2-minute elevator pitch. So if you had to tell me who is Curtis Price from the standpoint of personal journey as well as journey as a business owner in 2 minutes, elevator pitch, what would that look like?
2 minutes.
Yeah.
Look at the clock. First, I'm Curtis Price. I'm a dad.
Okay.
I'm a husband. And I've grown up in a entrepreneurial environment literally my entire life. So retail, fitness, opening up my own gym, kind of very foresight, or I don't know if foresight's the right word, but I can kind of predict trends coming or see trends coming. So more future-y kind of seer. Fun.
Yep. I agree
laid
with
back. But I very passionate for whatever I'm involved in. And it can kind of be anything, and I think growing up the way I grew up, it gave me a really interesting kind of look at business. So I don't know if that's a 2-minute, if I even really did anything for 2 minutes.
It's a good start. So, one of the things that I feel like is important is to talk about the journey that has been kind of from the time, let's say, at least from the time that I met you, and you can talk about before then as well. But, you opened a CrossFit, establishment, and it was, very big. I took classes there. That's, my husband, that was a major part of his fitness journey, honestly, that has catapulted him kind of into the things that he's doing, the competitions and things like that. Sure. So what inspired you to start that particular, endeavor, and maybe what was happening before I met you? Yeah. Right. That kind of inspired that.
So really what had happened is my family has had a health food store in Laurel. My grandparents opened up one of the first health food stores really on the East Coast.
Right.
Back in 1971. It was called Laurel Health Food. People would come in and make fun of them. Really like, who's going to take a vitamin? What are you guys doing? And then 50 some years later, who isn't taking a vitamin?
Right.
So growing up, the store was literally like a second home. I had pictures of me and my brother like sleeping in the back of the store. There's no child labor laws when it comes to true entrepreneurship.
Right.
So growing up in that environment gave me a different look at business, or it was just living. It was just day to day, you know. Fast forward, I ended up moving to northern Italy for all 4 years of high school. And there I started to get a little bit more into the weight room because of sports and girls. And
absolutely.
So then the health food store started to take on a different, I looked at it differently because I wanted protein powder.
Right.
Or now I would come back home, back to the States for the summer. So the store started to change a little bit because it was like, oh, I can have my grandmother like order this hot stuffed protein.
Right.
And she'd order the protein and I have protein powder.
Right.
May not have tasted good. Actually, back then it probably didn't.
I was like, a lot of it did not.
Like horrible.
Really bad.
Horrible. Went Bowie State. I graduated from Bowie State. And on campus, I was kind of like the healthy go-to guy. I would have echinacea stuff in my dorm room. I'd have organic chips and cookies. And back then, organic was really like
hard to find
and frowned on. Like,
right.
Oh, that's healthy.
Right.
And I mean, granted, it tasted just like an Oreo. It was just an organic Oreo.
Right.
So no late nights snacking in the dorm room. Nobody was really touching my snacks because they thought, you know, it was healthy. It wouldn't taste good. And granted, it tasted just like, you know, the regular stuff.
Right.
At the time, though, I was still, you know, I have to still work at the store, man my station, you know. So weekends, you know, I would typically work in the store. But it was just it was just life.
Right.
I would go to see my grandmother or my mom, or you go to the store. You know, I'd get snacks. I'd go to the store. But graduating from Bowie State, I knew I wanted to do, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew the typical kind of a 9-to-5 regular job that just wasn't, I just wasn't interested in that.
Right.
I didn't know how I was going to figure something out, you know. But it was around this time that these Dr. Atkins bars came onto the market, right? And we had all kinds of bars at the health food shop, but people were literally buying like 6-8 boxes of bars at a time.
Right.
And for me, being the marketing guy, I was just like, yeah, like what's up with these bars?
Right.
You know, like we have other bars. People aren't walking out with boxes of them.
Right.
And it literally went from a shelf to me finding products to an end cap. And then I was able to convince my grandmother to let me carve out like a section in the store for just low carb merchandise. And I put a key on the register so I could track the sales. And the money that we were starting to generate
from just
the low carb section, because, and granted, so putting like, I guess, timeline, this is 2001, 2002. Right. YouTube like is new.
Right.
Like, so none of social media didn't exist.
Yeah.
You know, so like, it's not like the store started to really catch on. And
right. Like it didn't go viral for something.
There's no way it could. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But people started to figure out this health food store has low carb stuff.
Right.
So then I was like, you know what? I'm going to open up a low carb store.
Right.
People would laugh at me. People didn't know what the hell a carb was.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So this is back like people didn't like carb. Like what's a carb?
Right.
And I was able to secure some financing. Actually, the first bank that my family had banked with for years, they turned me down. Dang. Which was, you know.
Right.
I mean, I like to say I still look young. But like a 23-year-old Curtis, like I really looked young.
Look like a baby.
Yeah.
And they were like, we're not giving him,
you know, 40 grand, 50 grand. But I knew my stuff.
Right.
I knew how to buy the shelves, the refrigerators. Like, you know, I literally was in that my whole life. And I opened up one of the first low carb stores in the country. It was in Cloverly.
And what was the name of it?
It was called Whoa, That's Low. The low carb, low sugar superstore.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Whoa, That's
cute.
Low.
Right.
Yeah. And now that actually really took off.
Right.
And it was at a time where I would just fax or email any news, all the major news networks in the area, just low carb. I had made up some press release, and I would just fax every day.
That's crazy.
Fax is dating
right.
too.
Yeah.
Fax and email. And before you knew it, like, because the low carb, it was like as I opened the store, the Atkins diet popped.
Right.
And so I had literally Fox. I was on the main studios of Fox, CBS. I just don't have the footage, you know, because it didn't,
right.
You know what I mean? None of this stuff to like pull it and post it.
Right.
It wasn't there.
Yeah.
But I was interviewed on all the major news networks.
Crazy.
I was even interviewed by Deutsche Welle, like German news, which was so crazy in the store. And I was like, wie geht's?
How old were you at this time?
In my early 20s.
That's crazy. How did you know, like, this, like, how did you have this ingenuity to understand, like, how to market this idea?
Just, I had to figure it out, put it out, and using what I had at my disposal.
Right.
You know, there was phone calls or faxing or really emailing and then word of mouth.
Yeah.
You know, that was kind of it.
That's amazing.
But what was wild is that then local news were coming into the store to film my shelves.
Right.
So they would have B-roll.
Right.
So if they were running a story in another part of the country and Fox News needed a shelf of low carb, so I don't know where my store shelves might have ended, but they would literally come in, shoot products.
That's crazy.
And then leave, and then that connection was there.
Right.
We're like, hey, you know, we'll do a story, you know. I secured over $250,000 of angel investing money at the time, and literally as I did that and was about to get the funds, we were going to open up we were set to try to open up like a chain of stores, right? And then literally the low carb industry, the bottom fell out.
Right.
And I actually was on the cover of the Washington Post business section, and I knew that the person interviewing me wanted a negative kind of like story. But my whole thing at this point too was like diabetes. I was looking at the low carb from an actual health standpoint.
From necessarily a weight loss standpoint.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So I was like kind of standing on like, people need to watch their sugar, processed carbs. This stuff works. This is how people need to eat, what have you. And on the cover of the on the Washington Post, it's like low carb fad is over. And I'm like, there's a picture of me smiling like in the store.
Yeah.
So needless to say, the money, the investors kind of pulled out, you know. But it was through this journey with the low carb store that I got into self-defense. And kind of, again, this is before the UFC there was no UFC, but really self-defense, fitness.
Right.
And I was looking for a way to hit you harder, and I came across this website called CrossFit.com.
Okay.
And
there's the birth of the CrossFit.
That's CrossFit.
Yeah.
And so I saw this, and I understood at the time I was using like kettlebells, plyometric push-ups and pull-ups. I understood certain things. I wasn't doing any of the more complex Olympic lifting involved with CrossFit. But I went on this kind of journey through that I had to close my store. I had 2 stores at the time. I had to close them, and I couldn't train with boxing like I used to during this time. And but I was doing CrossFit workouts at my apartment gym. And 8 months went by. I went back to my boxing gym. There was a new guy there helping out, and he thought I was like really new.
Right.
And I wasn't. I mean, I knew how to handle myself.
Yeah.
And so we were doing jiu-jitsu. I was rolling with the guy, and before you know it, I could hear him like breathing like heavier and heavier. And literally I'm like rolling around this guy. I'm like CrossFit. And then he had to tap out because he was tired. And then I was really I was like, CrossFit.
Right.
Because that's all I was doing was playing with these workouts. And for me, then it applied.
Right.
Like it worked. It wasn't like I didn't look any different coming back into the gym, you know, but my cardiovascular threshold. And from a street fighting standpoint, you can't be like, hey, man, you know, I'm a little winded right now. Give me 10 minutes. Catch my breath and we'll start fighting again. So it really sold me like, this is phenomenal strength conditioning training.
Yep.
And that's kind of what led me to drinking the Kool-Aid of CrossFit. And then I started kind of telling people. And it was really, at the time, there were only 2 CrossFit affiliates in DC. There was maybe 5 in the entire state of Maryland. And I started CrossFit Laurel in the back of like the Laurel Boys and Girls Club boxing gym.
Wow.
We didn't even have, we wouldn't even tell people because the building was so unsecure.
Yeah.
And other patrons would use my little gear.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be like, hey man, that's my stuff, because you could literally walk in there whenever you wanted to and then just been like, just took it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that grew from, literally nobody. And then, years went by, moved to another space, then negotiated a lease, all this stuff. And that kind of like segued to within real estate world, because I was negotiating leases. I was doing all this through my early 20s, mid 20s. And with CrossFit, I was very apprehensive because I just I didn't get burnt with entrepreneur world, but having a high of like, I was so close to like having, some of the people that I talked with and interviewed with to get this $250,000, they were big, you know what I mean? Like, and for me to go from there, industry falls out. Like, I couldn't control if the baker that was making the low carb bagels went out of business.
Right.
And so the inventory was just like
all over the place.
I don't have nothing to sell you.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to start another business.
Yeah.
And it just organically kind of like grew, and that's how CrossFit Law really kind of came into its existence.
Right.
I was proud that we didn't have any loans, because it was so, if you paid me money, I'd buy a ball.
Right.
If I got some more money, I'd buy one barbell. And so, that is how we really operated. And then good old COVID hit.
Yep.
And that truly just decimated my whole, that wasn't a good.
Yeah.
I'm actually now kind of coming out of that.
Yeah. So I have a ton of questions. Like, resiliency is what it sounds like is like the key to kind of your journey, right? Because as you're alluding to, CrossFit Laurel doesn't exist in that instantiation anymore. So what is, first of all, these are, I see how things are linked. You being a realtor, you having the health food store, you creating the CrossFit gym. How do you balance doing all of these different things at the same time sometimes, right? Like, how do you succeed that way?
I don't know.
Okay.
No.
That's a good answer.
I'd say really it's the I'm a creator.
Right.
I like dreaming, and like, that's just who I am. But honestly, if I didn't have my my amazingly smart, loving, and beautiful wife, Paula, in my corner, a lot of this would have stopped a long time ago.
Yeah.
Because she's really the support, because she knows who I am, and kind of has allowed me to be able to keep pushing, keep trying to make it happen.
Right.
So really that's a big thing too with entrepreneurs, or like, it's fun. It's easier when you're young, young and single, or just young.
Right.
Because especially no children, you could sleep on a cot wherever, and like, make it whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But as you you get older, you have family, it's a lot more challenging. And I think that's it's just the sacrifices that you have to kind of make. I still make, I wouldn't even call them sacrifices. It's if I want to go to another level, then I have to change, not necessarily change, I have to start doing things differently that Curtis would be doing at that level.
Right.
So I've learned so much too, just personally. But resiliency is definitely one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not easy. It can look sexy on the outside, but real entrepreneurship, like, you take it home.
Yeah.
It's there.
All the time, 24/7.
You wake up at night, it's there. The stress that I had, especially during COVID, and like, like anybody could just leave.
Right.
You know what I mean? But the landlord was still sitting there
looking for their money.
Like COVID never happened.
Right.
And even now, there's still this like, it's crazy how, but that's what you gotta, it is what it is.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some things that you've learned about yourself, right, through this journey, through all of these experiences that like kind of opened your eyes to like what makes you successful, also what makes people want to be a part of what you're doing, because I feel like you naturally have people that want to join you on your journey and support it and things like that. So what have you learned about yourself that has been kind of revealed over the years navigating each of these businesses?
I guess it's with the low carb store and even the gym, it's more of the I like going against the current,
right,
or going against the grain. So the sheer fact that nobody knew what a carb was enticing,
right?
You know, the sheer fact that I would do a workout on my birthday that encompassed like 4 miles of running,
right,
40 squat cleans with like 135 pounds, 40 box jumps. No,
right.
40 box jump, all this stuff, wearing a 20-pound vest. And I literally started doing it by myself on my,
right,
just by myself. And then I had the gym packed every year.
People wanting to come out and do this challenge with you, right?
Like, you doing that crazy workout? I'm like, yeah, you sure you want to? I don't know. I think it's I love kind of going to crazy places,
right?
And I think that the energy I have, it's welcoming too. So it's kind of if you want to jump in, by all means, come aboard,
right?
And let's have a good time or do this together. And I think that's that's part of the, I'm a leader, but I'm an inclusive leader, if that makes
absolutely
sense.
Absolutely.
I think I like people. I like the social aspect of interacting with people. And if you want to do this crazy thing with me,
come on,
let's go. Now don't be looking for me,
right?
Because I'm struggling. I'm struggling in this workout or this thing just like you are,
right?
But let's have fun. Let's do it.
Yeah. One of the things that you said earlier was that, a lot of the things that you've done over the years has been pre, social media, a lot of exposure through, platforms like YouTube and Instagram. And so how do you feel like the information that's available, as a wealth, specialist, right, through all the different forms, there's a lot of information that's out there. There's a lot of information that goes viral. There's right now, some of the things we're seeing is weight loss and weight management through drugs, which is now taking off and is huge.
So
and
horrible. So horrible.
Yeah. And how do you feel what are the things that the myths and the things that you're trying to navigate that you feel the world really needs to understand and needs to be exposed to?
Candace, that's actually why I've made sure I finish my book.
Right. And we'll talk about, because we're going to talk about the book. I want you to go in detail about the book. So go ahead.
I think that there's so much. So with the snapshot of where we're at right now, it's so easy for somebody to have a platform, which is great, right? But they may not know really what they're doing or what they're talking about, or the quick fix mentality that we as humans would want. Anything quick to solve a problem.
Absolutely.
Right? But in America, we're very immediate gratification. Microwave mentality. Put it in 60 seconds. It's hot and fresh. I can eat it. And it just really grinds at me. The drug, okay, take this.
Right.
For my diabetes, but I lost some weight.
Right.
It's if you don't understand food and how to eat and live a healthy lifestyle, what are you really doing to yourself?
Absolutely.
Because we don't know the ramifications, the impact that this could have 5, 10, 15 years down the road. I think it's really kind of, I don't want to say alarming, but and that's what it just
grinds your gears.
It does, because it's it takes work. It takes work. Now, even the which you don't hear as much, but the BBL world.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Which whatever you want to do, get after it, right?
Right.
But don't have surgery and then post pictures in the gym.
Right. You worked on this body.
That I'm doing it.
Yeah.
You're a liar.
Right.
you're like, no, you didn't.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Now, if you had whatever done to you,
right.
great. Want to exercise? Great. Right?
Want to maintain your investment?
Absolutely.
Because that's another part of it. Like, you need to maintain that. You can't just do that and then just go back to eating and drinking and sitting on the couch.
But don't think that now you're like some health and fitness expert.
Guru.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
and make a platform out of it.
Huh? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Like, no.
I know what your triggers are now, Curtis.
Or, it's like you can see the six pack.
Right.
But your arms and your legs are still like fluffy.
Right.
You can't have abs and fluffy arms.
Right.
It just doesn't work like that.
Right.
If you had the abs, your arms would probably be leaner.
This is a very particular one for you, huh, Curtis?
There's certain things where I'm like, really?
Right.
Because it's then you have a younger girl
absolutely
looking at that, and it's like, oh, well, that's how I'm supposed to look, and you can get that if that's what you're after.
Right.
You got to, certain things you got to work for it. That's why everybody doesn't have up abs and this and that, because it's
work.
Diet, it's sacrifice. You got to work for it, you know? So that's really
the rub.
That's really what got me, because Instagram was starting to really pop. I had this concept of my book for a while, and then I was like, all these experts.
Right.
And I'm just like, you're now a vegan.
Right.
For like, what, 8 months? Like, you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, I grew up in a health food store. Like, I had this story that I wanted to do. And I was like, you know what, damn it. I got to finish.
Right.
I got to finish this book.
Right.
If it's just for my own personal, like, I did it.
Right. So tell me about the book. This is the stage for you to talk about the book, why you wrote it. I think the book is really interesting because it ties in the dynamics of kind of, the slave trade and how some of these things were born and kind of like assimilated our lives into this century, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's really different. I've never actually looked at it from that lens of understanding how, these things, were sold to us and then continue to kind of pervade our experience, right? And so like talk about it, tell us the name, tell us where we can find it, but also tell us what was your motivation and then, what was important for you to convey in this book.
So the name of the book is called The Itis Revealed, and basically it's a look at sugar's role through history, how sugar really fueled the slave trade to the Americas, how sugar is still enslaving the black and brown communities, really everybody, but especially the black and brown communities today, and then how you can actually break free from its shackles by living an actual healthy lifestyle. So it's kind of part history book, part science-y book,
right,
and then part personal kind of memoir. And it's the concept kind of came out. I think I was in my low carb store at the time, and I was an avid reader. So once I got really into watching carbs, low carb products, I couldn't sell you something if I didn't believe it. So I really personally kind of started to look at what I was consuming. Mm-hmm. And then in my family store, I was eating organic and even the actual natural food industry, which could be a whole, as a kid going to, it's called the Natural Products Expo, which is the biggest health food expo in the country, seeing the size of it grow.
Right.
I was like right in that cusp of like the early 80s, 90s, and now it's just huge thing, right? You couldn't have a Whole Foods size store in the early 80s.
Right.
Because there wasn't enough
demand.
There wasn't enough manufactured processed health food to fit the store.
That's amazing.
It didn't exist.
Right.
Like I remember we got cereal and it was such a big deal. Until we ate it. It was there was no like as a kid, it was like you had to heap sugar. It was just like
for it to taste like anything.
Were like oat O's. That was it. There was no honey nut, nothing. Right. So you couldn't have the store, right? You couldn't have these massive stores. So now looking at like food labels from the low carb standpoint and being like, damn, like this has 40 grams of carbs.
Right. So does this even qualify as low carb at that point?
Well, I'm looking at it from like, now I'm going back into my family store.
Got it.
Like I would have ate this cookie
Right.
And then had this organic juice.
Yep.
And that alone would have been like 100 carbs.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Organic and the cookie's vegan.
Right.
And it's just like, damn, like, really?
Right.
This is crazy.
That is crazy.
And that's kind of what helped, like, I guess, push the, how do I get people's attention without being like, hey, it's a weight loss book, or because so many things I would read really weird. Well, I thought it was interesting stuff about fungus, but like science books, because we would have this section in the health food store, and we also had a very local Dr. Shamim. He passed away a few years ago. He was a very cutting edge, natural homeopathic doctor who didn't want to do surgery, wanted to treat cancer holistically. Actually had his medical license snatched from him. And this is all like 70s. Right. You know, and then kind of, I guess I'm jumping around, but then seeing how so many people now, it's so easy for them to just get on a platform and be like, oh, do this. Yep. And it's like, there were real pioneers within this world. He was like one of them. So seeing people come into the health food store that, I know you have cancer, and then see them, it go in remission. Right. Just because of sugar, cleaning up their diet, taking certain supplementation. Also then seeing people, and they did make it. Right. So having this kind of like peek into this real world of health food and health. So now from the low carb store, it's like, as the industry fell out from underneath itself, it's like, I know this is right. Like, I know, even to this day, like, I know watching your sugar, your processed carbs, like, that's how you should really live. Right. And, like, how do I now put something out here? Because the books were really boring. And I was like, well, I could write a book. Right. Like, I'll write a book.
I could write something more interesting than this.
And that was I don't know what made me look at, it was just, sugar. And it was like, well, where'd it come from? And this just led me down this personal rabbit hole of like, well, where did it come from? And then the more I kind of like peeled the onion back, or like just this, to me, it was really interesting. Like 530 BC, it's first recorded in Polynesia, and then Polynesians invaded. That conqueror takes it back to like Persia. Years later, they're invaded, and sugar actually travels through war. Right. And there could be like hundreds of years in between this, and then what really affects us, it's like, then it's in the Middle East, and you have the Crusades. Right. And the Crusades really weren't about Christianity or Islam. There was that aspect, but it was really about spice, because in Europe, you didn't have, the Sub-Z freezer. Like, you didn't, if you slaughtered the animal, you had
to do it right now.
You had to preserve it somehow. And that really is what fueled, like, I need more spice. I need more sugar from the king. Right. And then the Americas were discovered. So seeing like, and then trying to put this together in a way of like, oh, well, you know what? This is for me, I'm like, this is pretty interesting. Right. I never heard of anything like this.
I'd never.
Which then it's like, what's enslaving the black and brown community today? Right. Diabetes, type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes. 1 out of 3, Americans are pre-diabetic. So that's the trying to figure a way out to get people's attention, not to be like, hey, you should cut this out. Right. Because you're going to resist that. There's going to be a pushback of that. Like, whatever. Right. Because you can talk sex, politics, but if I'm like, I don't think you should eat that. Right. Especially to a stranger, man, you might be fighting. Right. Pretty much. Like, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
What do you think? So someone picks up your book. What do you think are like and I don't want to give it away because I want people to read the book, obviously. But like, what do you think are going to be the most unique things that people will take away after they read your book? Like, they're going to be like, I'm so glad, because some of this stuff I would have never known before.
I think that, I hope people kind of take away a different perspective of sugar and how it like made its way around the world. How it actually really, the slave trade in a way really started. Because I always would think of slave the slave trade to the Americas is cotton, tobacco.
Right.
Right. And when you actually start to look at the dates, Plymouth Rock was like 100 years later. The slave trade was rocking and rolling in the Caribbean and within South America, like it was going. But you just don't think, you don't think of that. You think of the South and cotton, but it was going. So that aspect, also what the itis actually is, which was one of those, like, I'm Googling around and trying to figure out, well, what is causing.
Right.
And it's it's such a weird postprandial somnolence.
Okay.
Which basically, when you eat a big meal, blood is essentially restricted from your extremities to kind of like focus here on this is like, your heart.
Right, your trunk, that area,
Like if you were out cold.
Yep.
That's why you get frostbite, and then you go to sleep. So essentially, all that energy can digest all that food you just ate.
So the itis is real.
It is real. Yeah, postprandial somnolence. So that fungus, I do talk about fungus in the book a little bit. I think that is probably one of the biggest health risks really in the world. We just don't understand it. Like, we don't look at it like that. A lot of people don't even know what the hell fungus, like what he's talking about. There's over 200 strands of fungi. Candida albicans is probably one of the more common. Yep, especially within women are familiar with Candida. But when you actually crave sweet, we all have fungus inside of us. It's a natural thing, so it's not like you can get rid of it all. It's natural. But the overprescription of certain medications, which are all fungi, that kills bacteria, so it kills all the good bacteria in your body as well. So you could actually have fungus overgrowth, and the only thing fungi live on is sugar.
Right.
And that's why you actually crave sweet. The fungus releases a mycotoxin to stimulate you to feed it, and then you feed it.
Right.
That's why you don't crave protein.
Right.
I'll be like, man, I could use some fiber right now.
Right. Right.
So
it's like there is a direct causal for that, because
that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And so I have all these nuggets of things over the years that I would be reading.
Right.
I used to sit at Fridays at happy hour and I'd have like fungus books reading, because I would still go to Young and Single. I'd be like, yeah, but I need this information.
Right.
Yeah. But these nuggets of like damn, like, wow, really? And so when you cut out carbs and sugar from your body, people now call it the keto flu, which is all BS. It's called Herxheimer's response.
Okay.
And that's the actual dying off of the fungus, because you're starving it.
Right.
That's why you feel sick, because you're going through withdrawal.
That makes sense.
Just like an alcoholic or a drug addict, like you go through withdrawal.
How long does the withdrawal typically take?
Depending on the person, depending on how much of a fungal problem they have, probably 2-3 days, a week. But essentially, the fungus is dying off. It's released into the bloodstream. Essentially, it's passed out. You eliminate it out of your body.
Right.
But that's what's causing that to happen, is you're restricting now the food source.
Right.
So stuff like that, I don't think I really go into, because certain things I was like, I couldn't really reference it. So it's also a reference book.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I have like tons of, it is a researched and referenced book.
Yeah.
But like certain fungi under a microscope can look identical to cancer, like a cancer cell. So now if you chemo the person.
Right.
But it's not.
But that's not what they actually had.
And now they've actually died. They died from the radiation, from the chemotherapy.
Right.
When it was a fungal problem. And I think that's why sometimes when you go the holistic road, the person drastically changes their eating.
Right.
Right. And now the cancer went in remission.
Right.
It might not have been cancer in the first place. It might have been a fungal problem that looks like cancer, but we don't look and screen for fungus like that. So that I think people would like, or I hope they take away or start.
Yeah.
So even with the fungal thing, it's like to get you to see your food or things differently. I know personally around the holidays, I will probably eat more cake or more things that probably have higher sugar count. But when I restrict it again, I'll start to feel nauseous. but it's like, it's Herxheimer's response.
Right.
Like I know,
and I'm not going to give in to that.
And I know what's happening.
Right.
So to make it where it's like, oh, now this is how it becomes lifestyleable.
Right.
How do you really live a healthy lifestyle? And like the vegan movement, I'm very anti.
It sounds like it. You're anti-vegan?
I am a strict vegan, but I just like really good quality protein.
Right.
From animal to complement.
So those go together. You're right.
And I say that now, if you don't want to eat animal byproduct, that's one thing, right? Religious reasons, personal like all good, do you? But don't think because you put this title of like vegan or vegetarian or plant-based hat on,
right?
That now you are somehow healthier than thou, because you're eating just as much sugar and processed carbs as somebody who eats meat or whatever. It's not the meat that's the problem.
Yeah.
It's the stuff. It's the French fries. It's the bread. It's all the things that accompany. So if you eliminate all of that and you have a good quality protein source, you have good quality complex carb, healthy carb veggies or fruits, nuts, seeds, add that in, you're living like this really good, healthy lifestyle.
One of the things I think that we found was like when the Beyond, franchise was kind of getting big and all of that type of stuff. And then they start to have a lot of competitors in that area. Mm-hmm. So like there's other ones that are popping up and we're looking at the nutritional information and we're just like, I'm so confused. Like I get that I'm eliminating the animal byproducts, but like this does not look healthy.
Super processed.
Right? Like, and I didn't understand at the time, like, the switch and like a lot of those things that were happening for those products, those particular products, not necessarily holistically the vegan movement, but for these things that are making such major waves in the industry and taking up huge amounts of market share. Yeah. I was like, I don't know if this is any better
it's not,
to put in my body.
Because it's like if you, a good visual thing I like to tell folks is like if you look at somebody who's bulimic, right, which they have an eating disorder, no bueno, like you, right. But if you look at them, they tend to be very drawn in, right? And if you look at certain really strict, like vegan or people that eliminate animal protein from their diet, they also look very drawn in. Their bodies are eating their muscle to get the amino acids that they need to fire to their brain. Like if we don't have aminos firing to our brain within like seconds, you're gonna black out, and then seconds after you will be dead. Right. So there is like you need good quality protein sources coming into your body, and I just look at it all too, where it's like your goals, what are you after, especially within a fitness or your health. And there's not any real vegan out there that I've seen, and I'm like, I want to look like him. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. And more than likely, if he or she has a strong muscular build, more than likely that was built
pre-vegan.
And now they just went vegan.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll have meals that are straight vegetarian.
Absolutely.
Right. But I'm going to have chicken at some point. I'm going to have fish. Right. I have beef. I have lamb. I don't eat pork personally, but I'm going to get protein within my diet.
Right.
So that's all part of the book. I call it flexitarian living, or how you can, I think we get two blinders on, well, I'm a vegan.
Right.
And then it's like, you know what, after a while, you want honey.
Right.
Or, I've had so many conversations with people. I'm like, I'm a vegan, but I eat fish.
Right.
I'm like, you're not a vegan.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you're not.
You like parts of that lifestyle and the way that makes you feel in those instances, but you're not strictly a vegan.
Right. And it's cool.
Right.
Don't put the vegan hat on.
Right.
Like they don't eat honey.
Yeah.
They're very strict.
Yeah.
Right. And if that's your thing, get it.
Yeah.
But I think we like to have the title of or feeling like the plant-based.
Right.
It's like, here we go. Like plant-based, huh? Like, all right. Then you see all these products come out, plant-based.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like, and then you look at that stuff and you're like, the amount of saturated fat and
all
like,
I'm
like, how did this even happen if there's no animal byproducts? Why are the macros like this if there's no animal?
Something's in there.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I was just like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hopefully people take away kind of just a different perspective of living a healthy lifestyle, and even add fitness stuff in.
Yeah.
Personal kind of stories throughout the book that, kind of impacted me growing up in kind of a retail health food store.
Right.
I've seen so much stuff, good and bad, or just different, and then the gym too, having folks come in and then seeing a true transformation. To me, I love that. That's what really draws me to coaching, is the, folks that having somebody that doesn't think they can, or now you teach them how to, make these little incremental bumps, and then before you know it, they could barely jump rope, and now they can do double unders.
Yep.
Or they can do something very complex, and seeing that, for me, it's really, rewarding, or I like that.
Yeah. And it just, I think people really value someone who's coming to the table with both or all the different facets of like helping them on their journey, right? Like, it's not, oh, I just go to you and I work out and I'm building muscle and getting stronger, but I'm also fueling that these workouts and these things that I'm doing with healthy eating or changing like my lifestyle, so that I have the energy that I need to go out and propel me through these workouts and through these endeavors, or whatever each person's thing is, right? And I think that is kind of holistic picture is something that we as society are missing, right? And figuring out, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about in this space today was, I look at across the market industry for gaps in the technology landscape, right? Because I have a lot of people who want to create apps, and I'm working with a lot of founders and trying to help them navigate. Sometimes you get to a place where the market is really saturated with, fintech, the types of fintech apps that are out here are really saturated. But one thing I noticed over the last few months when I was doing my analysis for some of my founders was there's not a lot of holistic, health management, health specialty wellness management apps that live out in the market, right? And even someone like me, when I was trying to lose weight over the last few years, I realized I had downloaded like 7 different apps to be able to do all of the things I needed to do. I had, of course, the standard MyFitnessPal to track, my macros, but like there was also If It Fits Your Macros to figure out like how I am navigating all of the different things that I eat and all of that. And then grocery planning and meal planning, and then also understanding like my sleep patterns. And so I had the Fitbit app that I was analyzing, and every day I was waking up and looking like, how did my sleep go? And it's like I literally had 100 different apps. So like, what do you see, on trend with like your wealth management, specialty, like that we should be putting out into the world in terms of technology that's going to help us achieve, more holistically better care for ourselves, better, not necessarily just fitness, but just like being more, physically fit in terms of like cardiovascular fitness and things like that. Like, what do you see in the world? What would you suggest?
I think that I think all of this that's happening right now, it's so new.
Right.
And it's kind of like it's shiny gadget overload, that the technology is coming out so fast that we can't really keep up with it, because there's always the next Chat GPT H or whatever the hell. I don't know. I'm still trying to just
listen. Luis every other week will be like, "There's a new Chat GPT coming out, and you get it for free because you have premium." And I'm like, "I didn't use the last one, so I don't even know what."
I thought Chat GPT is Chat GPT. How are there new ones?
Right. It's like, no, it's every week. Luis would be like, "There's a new one coming out tomorrow." I'm like, okay.
It's like Google 2.0, Google 3.0, but it's Google. It's just search stuff.
I agree.
So I think that over time, and this is something that we could talk offline.
Right. Absolutely.
But within my book, so just to kind of, simplicity is key.
Right.
And I think that when we have too much stuff going on, we won't really stick to it.
Yeah.
You could use the app for a period of time, and then that shiny object is going to like lose its luster because this thing popped out.
Yeah.
It's like, well, whoa, what about this one?
Right.
And then, well, what about this one? So I think that, riches are niches. And instead of trying to be something for like one thing for everybody, if you niche it down to where, from a business standpoint, you might look at it like, well, there's not a lot of market share in that. But the market share that is in that is what you would, if you can tap that vein, you really will make profit. You will be successful.
Right.
Instead of trying to be the fitness app for everybody, be the fitness app for this sliver of post-bariatric surgery patients. And you blow that niche up where you have everything that a post-bariatric surgery
is going to need.
They need this. They need how much protein, what type of proteins, where can they get the proteins for that sliver of people.
Right.
You'll be even more successful than trying to be the app for everybody trying to lose weight or everybody trying to be healthy.
Right.
Like, how can you really serve that? And then the person taking the app in, how can you navigate all this stuff?
Right.
And I think for me, that's one of the things with the technology that's coming out so fast, where it's like, I know what I have to do, but I'm not techie.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it's like, I see it.
Yeah.
I see what's happening.
Right.
Case in point, I was trying to buy Bitcoin.
Oh man.
Bitcoin was $50.
Okay.
And I couldn't figure out how the hell to buy it. I just couldn't.
You never bought it? You didn't end up buying it?
Well, I have some now, but it's not like, no, I had like a couple $100. I could buy a whole coin for 50.
Right.
There wasn't Cash App.
Yeah.
These things, none of this existed.
Yeah.
But because I was dialed in on like commodities, studying gold and silver, physical bullion, and now this guy's like, yeah, this, it's called cryptocurrency and it's Bitcoin. I was like, Bitcoin.
Right.
But you had to actually know how to get the blockchain. I know how to do that. I was like, yeah. And I see it.
Right.
And then I was like, whatever.
I'm tired.
And then before you know it, it's just like I look up $1,000 for a Bitcoin. I'm like, then I was really mad.
Yeah.
I was like, really forget it.
Right.
Now it's just like.
So the barrier to entry was high at that point because
you couldn't figure it out.
The information wasn't out there.
Yeah. So now there's so much now.
Yeah.
So I think with apps and stuff like that for your health, I think that if you make it more niched.
Yeah.
I know one of the things that you were asking about too was the sustainability and like this kind of world. There are movements happening from more holistic, true like lifestyling, which I think is phenomenal. I really see that that's going to be a huge market area.
Right.
In our very near future is going to be food. So within a digital world, how many people do you know growing spinach? You know what I mean? How many people using an app? Like, okay, do you need the app?
Right.
You need to eat some spinach.
Right.
Or you need to eat, you need to consume. How many people do we really know like growing and making food?
Right.
And so when you look at the holistic, natural world, I think that that's going to be, now you take the technology that we have, and that kind of goes back to how I'm able to do so much stuff, is the little bit of understanding of certain tech that I have, I try to implement it in my day-to-day life.
Right.
So I'm more efficient with my time. So that's using the technology, which I know I have so many gaps of of what I could be doing but I just personally can't wrap my head around.
Right.
I can't figure. I don't know.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Bitcoin thing. Like I see it. I don't know how the hell to buy it. Like
right.
So I see what I should be doing, but I don't know. That's why when we get off. I have some. Like I need to holler at your husband.
Right.
Like I know what I need to do with the book and what I need. I have all this. I have this stuff. How do I put
it all together
and have it where if you wanted it, here it is. You know. Yeah.
One of the things that I think is interesting is, like you said, there's a lot of things that come out. There's a lot of apps that come out. But I think helping people navigate, like, how do you make simple changes? How do you make small changes that will deliver incremental value, you know, having those types of things. So like you said, if you have the app that's really dialed in, but it's kind of taking that bariatric patient the person who just had the surgery, right, from, you know, beginning to end of their journey. And it's like the first things you need to do, you know, you're home a week post surgery. Right. Here's the first kind of things that you need to think about, right? But then their needs a year post surgery might be slightly different. So it's like, dial in onto who you're serving, but also take them on a journey so that you're like helping them kind of hit different plateaus and whatever the app is helping them with, right? And that's kind of like how I look at things. Like MyFitnessPal, when I was on my weight loss journey, I used it every day for a period of time, but then I got really good at understanding like what I should be eating after I used it so much. So then I just stopped using it because I can kind of look at and say, you know, today I'm going to eat, you know, some lean protein. I'm going to, you know, I was doing low carb stuff. So I was virtually like no carbs. Okay. And just like I kind of knew what my macros were going to end up looking like at the end of the day after, you know, 6 to 8 months of using this app every day and kind of starting to see the trends and things that were blowing up my diet that I didn't realize were blowing up my diet and things like that. So like I don't need it anymore, right? Like that's not an app that I use on a daily basis anymore because I now know kind of where I want to be and what I'm trying to accomplish and achieve. And so that's the other thing that I tell a lot of my founders, where it's like, you know, how do you start off on a journey where if you're building something, how do you stay relevant and kind of produce things that are helpful to people on their journey and not just here and right now. And I offer you this service and this is the service and then that's it. Like, and I think for the health world, that's actually kind of where it fits most cleanly, is that process of like, you were this person, you know, at the beginning when you put this app in your hand, and now you're at a different part of your journey. And so how can I continue to kind of help, you know, support that part of that journey that's later after you've been using the app for 2 years now, right? And that's the kind of thing that I try to tell founders is look at things that are going to be relevant and can evolve over time as they're navigating the space. And like you said, sustainability. One of the things that I don't even know what that means a lot of times when people are like, you know, what is when you talk about the word sustainability, it's like, oh, is that me just like composting? Like, what else can I do? Like, you know, as somebody who thinks that's valuable, but I don't know, you know, like what, you know, is that get an EV? Like, what are the things that I could do to kind of take those steps to be in that world where I'm doing things in a more sustainable way? So I would look for either a good article or an app that would help step me through. Like this month, we're going to focus on, you know, whatever part of your sustainability journey, like that type of thing. So it's like, those are the things where it's like, I don't know much about it and I need something that's going to take me on a journey to understand how I can improve that over time.
I think some things like with the folks you work with is to also look at maybe that app that you created isn't supposed to be forever. Right. You know, what if you specifically designed to meet the needs of this demographic, serve them, and now it's over? You know, so then you can actually focus on filling your pipeline with more people to serve within this 12 months, 24 months, or 36 months, and it caps out. And now, you know, it's done because they've essentially the Fitbit app worked in theory, because now you're able to look at whatever you're consuming or looking at and make the quick pivot and be like, oh, okay, I'm going to eat this, I'm not going to eat this. So in a way, the app worked because it taught you how to live like this, but the app didn't work for the creator if they were hoping that you were going to keep using the app forever and ever. Like, you know, like, you know, like after a while, you know what? I'm good. I don't need it. Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, so that's another thing of like, well, maybe your app or your thing, it's specifically for this shorter period, you know, 12, 24 month. And now if they want to continue to use it, you know, sure. But, you know, you're now looking to keep filling it with fresh people to serve, you know.
and like different communities that you could target it at that point.
Sure.
Which is actually that's a very interesting concept and different than how, developers look at when they're building technology and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much within the tech world, there's so much potential. I mean, the landscape is so massive.
It is.
But I think that too is kind of it's like the double-edged sword, that you can get so techie.
Right.
And then it's like, well, all right.
Right.
Now what? Like,
right.
Who's really going to use this thing to take it all the way there, where they might just need to go to level 3 and you over here on level 30.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, but the real market that you're after, they're level 3, maybe 4, but you're building it out to
level 30. And that's another thing. Like, that's another thing I caution my founders to be like, let's meet your people here and then evolve over time to see what the need is.
Yeah.
Listen to them. Listen to the people who are using your tools and then pivot versus going all the way for the gusto.
I think that's interesting because within a tech world, you can do that, right?
Right.
You can take this concept and then expand it to infinity.
Yep.
Right? But in a more brick and mortar world of business, you can't take the low carb store.
Right.
And I can't blow it up to infinity because there's so much operational expense that's involved. There's your lease, there's the monthly rent, there's your electric, there's the inventory that you have to physically purchase.
Right.
So I think in some ways that a real tech savvy creator can kind of lose themselves because there's no limit. I mean, outside of you having the electricity to run your computer.
And at the end of the day, Amazon takes care of all that for you.
You can create all day long, but it's like the ceiling has to be somewhere of like, okay, well, look, just chill out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, even Amazon, they started with just like books.
Right.
And then they expanded.
Absolutely.
And then they keep expanding and expanding.
Yep.
But if you have the ability to just like, boom, I'm going to Mars. Like, get to the moon.
Right. That is
and hang out there for a while.
Like just, relax. Like develop a, rapport with the people on the moon. And then, then we see where the community that you've built, where they want to go.
Yeah.
Right.
They might not want to go to Mars.
Right. They might want to just chill here and make, the moon beautiful. Right. Yeah. So like, I completely agree with that. And it's funny just because that is something that you see as insightful without having to be like a part of the tech community necessarily, but it's a huge pitfall for a lot of the founders that we work with.
Because then you won't put it out either. Because then there's the fear of like failure.
Yep.
There's the fear of like, so even with now the brick and mortar, a low carb store, or even like CrossFit training, people are like, what the hell is CrossFit?
Right.
I mean, I would literally get clowned by, like, oh, CrossFit. Some of the same people still look at me today like,
oh, CrossFit.
You look good. Like, yeah. Well, I've been doing the same. The low carb store you were heckling? I still eat that way.
Right. Right. That's why we look different.
That's what, because I live this. This
right.
is what I do.
Right.
I just don't have these things still out there.
Yeah.
I forgot where I was going with that, but I think it was kind of the keeping everything in somewhat of a reign of like, you can't just expand it forever, or you can't, nor should you try. I think that if you keep within somewhat of a boundary, and then as you need, and that's with the gym, I didn't want to move to a bigger space because I saw with the low carb store, the overhead, like what it took away from.
Right.
But then it was time to,
because it was growing so big.
It was like I have to expand it.
Yeah.
But I had to. Even now in like retrospect, it's like, did I really need to move to the next door space that was twice as big?
Right.
And that, hindsight, Monday morning quarterback is a bitch.
Yeah.
Because you can see like now, like, damn, you know what? If we would have stayed here, overhead would have been cut in half. This would have been different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But because you jump out there.
Right.
You know
I was
what
gonna say, how do you evaluate? Like, you got to take some risks, as an entrepreneur. And it's like the way the trajectory that it was growing was like, if everything went according to like what you've already seen, then you were going to have that many people and you were going to have that growth, and it was going to be necessary versus, well, maybe we move into a slightly larger space and then you outgrow that one, right? Yeah. Like, so it's like,
Yeah. Well, the gym was interesting because we moved from the Law Boys and Girls Club. We finally had our own like rent,
right?
Our own spot. And I'll never forget, there was a night in the gym, it was like packed. And I was leaving and the evening sessions were kind of going, but it was packed, right? And I was sitting in my car and I was just like, I was like, and I knew the space next door was open,
right?
Was vacant,
right?
Right. I knew how much it was going to be. So, the equipment that I was going to need to expand our pull-up rig, all this stuff literally came up to be close to $10,000. Like if I got 10 grand, I could pull it.
Easy.
We could move it. Where in the hell am I going to get $10,000 from? And I was really like praying, like, well, how do I make this happen? That night I went home, and at the time I was getting all these, you get statements from how the credit card processors work and everything. And so it was just like redundant statements of like, because we didn't have certain things organized, we would bill people just, you signed up today on a Thursday, that's when you would be billed 30 days from now. It wasn't like on the 1st.
Right.
So I had all these envelopes, and once Spirit was just like, open these up. And I was like, it was just
$10,000 cash advance?
Well, no, it was like, $50.
Yeah.
Or $80 or, 180. And then I was like, well, these were the receipts. Right. But then I was like, I don't think these are the receipts. So I called, and it was American Express. It was Amex. Yep. And when we changed credit card processors, I switched it from one online billing service to the other. I didn't update the new one to receive Amex. So I was getting Visa, Master, and Discover was hitting my account.
Right.
Was depositing into the actual gym bank
right.
account. All of these checks were actual checks.
Wow.
And so I was like, so these are live checks.
Right.
And she was like, yeah. And I had this was going on for a while.
Right.
And then I was like,
how much is it?
How much is it? She was like, oh, I can get this. She was like, oh, it was 9,800. And I was on the phone. I was like, no way.
Right.
I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And then she was like, no. And I was like, well,
okay.
How do I? So then I updated.
Yeah.
And then they canceled all the old, because they were all over the place. Some I threw away. Like, I just thought these were receipts or just. And so that was that night.
That's
amazing. I found $9,000, almost $10,000.
Right.
And then we signed a lease, moved, started the transition to move.
That's crazy.
But I guess if you don't try, if you don't go there,
right.
Like who would have thought COVID was coming?
Right.
But I've learned and grown so much over time too of but if I didn't try, if I didn't actually jump out there, you'll never know. Even writing the book, I was told by my 8th grade teachers that I'll be lucky to graduate high school.
Right.
I'm definitely not college material. I graduated from the first fully enclosed theater in the world in Italy in high school, graduated from college, but writing a book, how do you, but I know how to write a book now.
Yeah.
But if I didn't try, if I didn't go there,
right.
Even publishing it or all the stuff that you learn along the way, if you don't jump out there, if you don't try, you're never gonna, even the app, if you don't put it out, if you don't turn it on so someone can download it and try it,
I agree.
You never know.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what I'm saying is I know you're hindsight is 20/20, but at the end of the day, taking those risks and really rolling the dice and trying things, for me is the way that businesses take off, right? Nobody knew for sure if their idea or their brainchild was going to hit the market and run. Right. They just were like, I really like this. I'm going to put it out and I'm going to try. Right. Yeah. And that's, the biggest thing at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to, I'm big like, well, what the hell?
Yep.
So it doesn't hurt nobody. It's not anything negative. Go for it.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a great chat. I think that you have brought so many different insightful, things to the table in terms of helping people understand entrepreneurship, business, the mentality that goes behind, just trying things out and, doing things that you're passionate about too. I think that's another thing that's very important is you have a passion for all of these things and you just really are bringing that whole heart that you have for it to the table. And so it makes it meaningful, worthwhile, and just really delivers a supreme amount of value.
Cool.
So I appreciate you sitting down with us and sharing your tidbits of wisdom because, the entrepreneurial journey is complicated and it's complex. And, we've had a lot of different ups and downs and highs and lows. And it's just figuring out how to navigate all of those is sometimes half the battle, right?
Yeah, definitely. And then having people around you is so key. Certain people, not everybody.
Yeah.
Don't need everybody at the party.
I feel you.
You know what I mean?
We had to let some people go,
Yeah, you don't need everybody at the party.
Right.
But having and investing in yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing I've really been learning and kind of embracing is for me finding a coach.
Yeah.
Or not being afraid to, to learn, to keep learning.
Right.
I think that's one cool thing with life is it's all about experiences.
Yep. And you learn something from everything. Success and every failure. Yep. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Curtis. Yeah. So we are going to conclude today's show. I'm very excited that we were able to get kind of this peek into, Curtis and his, wisdom. As always, follow us on all of our socials, Glitch Grind Glow podcast, which is the Facebook, Glitch Grind Glow Instagram, and then glitchgrindglow.com is where you guys can find all of the different links to the places where the podcast is streaming. Thank you for joining us and have a good evening.